Welcome back to episode 2 on this Rooted and Rested podcast, where we talk all things about how to live a life that is thriving, even if you feel completely stuck in survival mode. Today, we're going to be talking about nervous system regulation for leaders. And when I talk about leaders, I want to make it really clear before we jump into any of these things that leadership can start with yourself. It does not need to be about how big your company is or how many people are in your team. This is not just about business. This could be leading a household. It could be leading yourself. Self-leadership is where it all begins, and we're going to talk about that today as well. But before anybody decides this isn't relevant for them and they aren't leading anything important or big or exciting, let me say that you are exciting and you also get to enjoy all of these tips for yourself. So we're going to start off by talking about why leadership, whether it's of ourselves just going through daily life or whether it's in a big multinational corporate company, why does it feel exhausting and how do we work with it? So first of all, I think the thing that we need to acknowledge is that there is a genuine hidden cost to leadership. And it starts with very simple observations, actually. We often equate leadership to be strategy, mindset, productivity, and resilience, and showing up and being strong. But very little of the conversation about leadership happens around what actually happens to the nervous system when we are leading. Many people think that they're tired because they're doing too much, or their to-do list is not in order, or they are having issues with other people and that's wearing them down. But very often it's to do with the fact that they're carrying too much psychologically. So leadership is not just cognitive. It's not something that is only about our mentality and how we think about how we approach the thing that we're leading. It's so much more than that. It's embodied. And I think I would love to see us moving towards a place where we view responsibility as something that lives in the body and not just in the mind. So we're going to ask some questions along the way. This is an opportunity for you to think about your world, about what you do, about how you interact with these things. It's like a little self-reflection moment. First of all, just have a think. Have you ever noticed feeling completely exhausted after a day of lots of decision making? I mean, when you have children at home, little kids at home, you're making a million micro decisions a second, and it is absolutely exhausting. Let's not beat around the bush. It is. Another thing to think about is, have you ever clocked feeling tense just before a difficult conversation? That could be with a colleague, it could be with a spouse or a partner, it could be with a child. There are so many difficult conversations that we navigate, and we often don't pay attention to sensation. As we walk through life, I feel like we're actually quite disconnected as people. We're very good at clocking into what we think and sometimes what we feel, but we don't often marry that to what sensations that we're carrying in our body at the same time. And that is something that I think is super important and I think we need to address. And that is part of what this work is all about. The somatic part of learning to regulate yourself is paying attention to your body, because it is always trying to communicate something to you about what's going on in that moment. So why does leadership demand so much of the nervous system? Really, it's about mechanics. Our nervous system is involved in everything we do. It is constantly communicating. It's constantly navigating what we put it through. And with leadership, whether that is, like I said, of yourself, of a team, of your family, of your home, there are many ways to lead that involve decision making, huge amounts of uncertainty at times, responsibility for other people, emotional containment and management of ourselves and often of other people as well. Although we cannot be responsible for other people's emotions, we are interacting with their ability to manage against our ability to manage. There is a push and pull sometimes between these things. And then we also have the visibility of ourselves and pressure we may feel in those spaces. And in each of those things, our nervous system is constantly scanning for potential threats. This is not something that is new. I think what is new is that this is coming to the forefront of our understanding of how humans work. I think there's been a massive divide in Western medicine between mental and physical health, and there needs to be a remarrying of these things, because our bodies experience our worlds before our brains catch up. And so that part of your brain that is scanning for potential threat is going to be sending electrical signals to all of your major organs ahead of our thought life. So it's actually faster than our thoughts. And so it's a physical response that we have before we've processed anything mental. And that is really important to understand when we look at things like decision making and being responsible for other people, because their bodies are doing the same thing as well. So if our bodies are constantly scanning for potential threats, it's not because our leadership is bad. It's not because our colleagues are bad. It's because it's high stakes, or it's got social pressure, or it's psychologically uncertain. And we are constantly scanning for the danger level and how safe do we feel psychologically and physically in each space that we're in. Some indications that we may experience of those different settings and what our body is scanning for and the level of threat it may have detected could be things like chronic low-level stress, hypervigilance. Maybe you have difficulty switching off at the end of a day. That's certainly something that I struggle with, and as a result have gotten very into reading, which has massively helped. We might have decision fatigue, where we just cannot come to a decision about things. That is very, very common, and people mistake it as, listen, sometimes it can be commitment fear, but sometimes it is not about being afraid. It's about the fatigue that has come as a result of our nervous system not being able to down-regulate to a point where we feel safe enough to make that decision. It may be that we feel physical tension in our body. Most common is the shoulders and the jaw. Sometimes it's also in the gut. IBS is a symptom of a dysregulated nervous system. You might have trouble sleeping, you might be irritable, or you might just feel emotionally absolutely spent and flat. Those are all very, very common things that I think a lot of us experience, often on a daily basis. I know I have. And we don't equate it with the marrying of the mental health and the physical health together. Those are all symptoms of a dysregulated nervous system, and that happens when our body has scanned and seen potential threat or potential danger and not been able to down-regulate once that danger has been spotted and responded to. And that is something that we just simply haven't been taught how to do. It's not something we've learned in biology at school as children. It's not something that's taught in school. It's not something that's talked about even by professionals, doctors, nurses, the NHS in the UK. Learning to regulate your nervous system and understanding the impact of the nervous system on daily life is not something that is talked about frequently. I certainly had never heard of all this stuff until I deep dived into a master's program. So how does dysregulation show up in leaders? It's all very well saying, oh, I can't switch off, or I can't sleep, or I feel a bit emotional or not emotional. But how does that actually impact leadership positions? Well, our nervous systems are always under sustained loads, whatever we're doing in life. But if we're dysregulated and we're leading in all those different spheres that I've mentioned, you're going to see it show up as different responses. Our nervous system has different responses to different threats. It has often been talked about fight, flight, and freeze, as if it's kind of like a menu options that our body might look into, which one is going to be the best response here. But I don't think, from what I've learned in my studies, that isn't quite how the body works. It's actually a progression. And in order to down-regulate, you have to move back through that progression, back down to a calm, regulated nervous system state. So rather than thinking of it's this or this or this, what you'll find is that the first initial response when a danger is anticipated is that your body will go into fight or flight mode. That means it floods itself with energy, so cortisol, adrenaline, and it will look for a way to either run away or fight. That means your energy is up. Now, I want to just say something really important here, because I think a lot of people view adrenaline and cortisol as very negative things that are bad for them. And I need to address that because that is fundamentally untrue. We need cortisol release every time we go to the gym. It's what gets us a little bit pumped up. It's what gets us energized, and our body is incredible at being able to tell when to release it and when not to release it. The problem with a dysregulated nervous system is when your body has misinterpreted a danger that is not a danger and floods the body in preparation for responding to that danger when there isn't danger. That is the trauma response. So we're going to look at a few examples of a fight or flight response. But before I do, if your body feels that running away or fighting this particular threat is not going to be sufficient, or it's not been effective in neutralizing the threat, it will move to dead possum, which is basically freeze. That means we are not safe. Fighting and running hasn't saved me from this danger. The only option now is to preserve my major organs and shut everything else down. Nothing else is essential. We're moving on. And that is your freeze response. It's the opposite of cortisol, adrenaline, when everything is a little bit sped up. You're feeling a bit pumped. You've got faster breathing. You're taking in more oxygen. Your heart is pumping. You might be a bit clammy in your hands. The freeze response is the absolute reverse. So it is totally dampening down the cortisol and adrenaline so that your body goes slow. It is preparing for hibernation, essentially. You just shut down. Everything shuts down. You might have a mental shutdown, an emotional shutdown, and a physical shutdown all at the same time. But your body has literally gone into survival mode. It's reptilian in its response. It's the most survivalist part of your brain that is operating at that point. And that is your freeze response. It isn't an option, it's a progression. So in order to come out of freeze, you often need to then do something physical to get that cortisol levels up a little bit so that you can downregulate. You can't actually very easily get a person who is stuck in the freeze response to just regulate. They need their body to wake up again in order to come down. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm trying my best to explain it. But when it comes to leadership, this kind of dysregulation with the fight or flight or freeze responses, they might show up in the following sort of ways. A fight response may look like a short temper. They might be a little bit over controlling or micromanaging. They might be irritable with people. These are all responses that would indicate to you that their cortisol levels are a little bit elevated and they're actually looking for a fight in order to dispel or disperse some kind of threat that their body has picked up on. And that could be anything, because that person has gone through their journey and is interpreting the world through the lens of that history and that experience. So it gets very difficult because we don't know other people's stories. We don't know what other people are carrying around with them. And yet that is what they're interpreting the world through. So when you come across somebody who is constantly losing their temper or is over controlling, rather than getting angry and frustrated, you can start to think about how, maybe they've gone through something that is causing them to interpret a threat in this scenario. And you can play your part to disperse that. It's about having compassion really for other people and hoping that they'll have it towards us, because we all go through these things. So that's your fight response. Your flight response might look like somebody who's overworking or is constantly over busy, or they cannot rest, or they're always thinking about work, or they're always thinking about this thing that they're leading, and they cannot turn it off. They cannot switch off. Those are very common things, and when I finish talking through this list, I'm going to just say one more thing. The freeze response is often misinterpreted as laziness. That is something that I've heard endlessly from people who have been working with others and they're frustrated. If you have somebody who's stuck in flight response and a person who's stuck in freeze response, the person in the freeze is always going to look like they're underperforming because they're procrastinating, supposedly, or they're avoiding decisions, or they have a brain fog, or they're feeling more stuck. They may end up being absent more often because their response is pulling them away, they're shutting down, as opposed to somebody who's stuck in a flight response where they may be overworking and over pushing and overcommitting. It's a massive clash. They are both nervous system dysregulation and possibly trauma responses to something that's going on in their world. So you can see how this starts to get really complicated as we navigate people in our worlds and ourselves and start recognizing these behaviors in ourselves. So I think it's really important to just say that these responses, obviously, they don't only affect ourselves, they shape the emotional climate that we are in. We impact the rooms that we are in. We impact the teams, the families, the homes, the clients, whatever it is that we do. We and our responses impact the world around us. So your nervous system really becomes part of the regulation system of that wider circle, whether it's your team or your family or whoever you're leading or yourself. It's about actually having a regulation and an awareness of your regulation for the sake of yourself, but for also the people that are around you. So actually, what I'm trying to say is leaders regulate environments. Intentionally or unintentionally, that's what we do. Before I move on to the next little chapter, I just want to say something that I think is really important to acknowledge, and that's something that I will probably say many, many times over, and that is that these responses that we have are really incredible. I think I get very sad when I hear about people who are going to see their GPs about anxiety or about depression or about panic attacks or anything like this. And they're essentially sent to a shrink, put on medication and treated as if they're broken or there's something wrong with them. And that is really sad for me because I think that the fact that they are having these panic attacks and this anxiety shows them that their body is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It is a protective behavior. Your body has spotted a threat and is doing what it needs to do to protect you from it. The actual issue is that it's misinterpreted some information, and that can always be fixed. That is not the end of the world. We can always readjust information and learn to undo or create new neural pathways. What we can't do is talk our way out of an irrational or reptilian survivalist response. That isn't, you can't rationalize somebody who's having a complete trauma response. That isn't, they're not sitting there and thinking about what they're doing. Their body is responding as it should to dispel or sort out, protect from a threat it's discovered. So part of what I am really passionate about is really empowering people to understand that there's nothing wrong with them. Actually, their body is doing an amazing thing. Yes, it may have misinterpreted some information along the way. It may have seen a danger when there isn't a danger. It may have done the opposite. It might not be recognizing a danger when there is a danger. That is trauma. That is what a trauma response is. But the answer is not drugs, and the answer is not talking therapy. I am not against talking therapy. I want to make that very clear. I have had it myself, absolutely think it has a place. But when you're dealing with a trauma response that is in the nervous system, that is a reptilian survivalist response that is physically led, you can't talk out of that. It's not something that is rational or well thought through or intentional. It is a basic survivalist response. It's a protective behavior, and that needs to be worked with, not treated as a problem. So I love empowering clients I have, particularly when they're younger or teenage even, that are struggling with anxiety or struggling with panic attacks or struggling with things that we all go through to varying degrees. I love to let them know that their body is doing an incredible thing and there is nothing wrong with them. There's nothing bad or broken happened to them. They just need to work with their body and train it and hone its skills so it's not misinterpreting the data quite so much. And there's a whole system for how you can do that, and that is what I do in my program. But the important thing is to try to understand that these responses are there to protect you. They're there to help you. They're on your side. They're not attacking you. They're not trying to hijack your life or sabotage you. They are trying to protect. So on that note, the ripple effect that these responses can have on teams obviously are huge. People often think that leadership impact comes from strategy, communication, good PowerPoints and management styles. And those things obviously can be very effective. However, I think the absolute first thing should be nervous system presence. So your team and people around you, whoever the people are in your life that you're leading, and even for yourself, the people around you, people are reading your tone, your pace, your presence, and how safe you are emotionally. Those are the first and basic things that we read before anything is said, before any presentation has happened, before any meeting has begun. Those are the things that we read and we scan in a room. And if as a leader, or if there is a leader in your world that is chronically dysregulated, you will find that their team will be anxious. You will find that their communication styles are all over the place and people don't feel like they know where to stand. The creativity and the innovation in the team will drop. That's the same with families and homes. If you have a dysregulated parent, chronically dysregulated parent, you will find that the kids are not creative. They won't be able to imagine their crazy games and create these things, these worlds that they play in. They won't be able to because they will be on high alert for their parent and managing their parent. And you will find in these situations that people will slip into operating in survival mode because their situation, the environment created by that leader, isn't stable. It's not safe. They don't feel like they can actually exhale. Opposed on the flip side of that, a regulated leader creates clarity for their team, and it creates psychological safety where the team and the people around them are able to explore ideas safely without worrying about response or what they may be up against. And they create a steadiness when there may be uncertainty. And for that reason, I would say that regulation is a fundamental leadership skill. And that is something that I really talk a lot about in my 6-month program, Rooted and Rested, also called Rooted and Rested, which is all about getting people to a place where they can regulate themselves, understand what they're going through, and stretch their capacity in a way that feels good, not in a way that breaks them, not in a way that stresses them out, not in a way that is overwhelming, in a way that is like exciting to them, because their nervous system is leading them and they are embodying all of the principles of listening to their body, listening to how they're doing, listening to what their body is interpreting from around them, and knowing what to do with that information. It makes stretching and growth so much more exciting and so much more possible, because you're working in a body and and you're creating environments that want that. So how do you recognize nervous system stress in yourself and in the people around you? It's actually, again, down to awareness that is simply not being taught, which is why I am doing this. I am very excited and passionate about empowering people with information, because actually this is just really basic stuff that we really should have been knowing all along. I don't really understand how we've got to a point where this isn't taught at school in the same way as biology is. So giving people the skills to self-lead, self-regulate, self-understand, understand self, and it empowers people to then translate that into their children, into their friends, into their families, into their workplaces. And that just is like magic for when you're dealing with any people. So 3 things that we can ask ourselves to do with our body, our speed, and our recovery. So in terms of our body, what does my body feel like right now? That might sound really weird. And I know for myself, I spent years completely dissociated from my body. I had absolutely no idea what that even meant. I had never connected or spent time listening to my body. I couldn't discern or differentiate things. It was just numb all the time. It felt the same all the time. I had, except for the fact that I was very aware of pain. I had pains in my joints for years. What does it feel like? What does your body actually feel like right now? Am I tense? Am I holding my breath? Is something clenched? My jaw, my shoulders, my palms? I often find this is what I notice myself doing. I've not even noticed I'm doing it in my jaw as well. I'm clenching and I don't know why. And when I notice it, I can pay attention and I can usually figure out what got me tensed. And it's usually completely nothing and actually isn't a real threat. So I can regulate myself and yes. Anyway, body, pay attention to what your body is telling you. Speed, am I rushing through conversations? Do I actually take a minute? Do I actually pause? Do I actually listen? Or am I just rattling through everything around me? Recovery, do I actually return to a baseline of calm after stressful moments? Or do I stay in the stress? Many leaders never check. They never check in with their body all day. They never pay attention to what their body may be telling them. Do they need a break? Do people around them need a break? But the important thing to clock here is that the body always tells the truth first, before the brain, before the mind, before the thoughts. The body tells the truth first. So, what can we do with all this information? Well, this is about learning how to regulate. This is about regulating yourself and seeing in others. I cannot tell you how empowering it is to know some of this information about how our nervous systems work and be able to translate that into dealing with our children, dealing with difficult colleagues, dealing with difficult kids. Maybe you're a teacher and you've got kids in the classroom. This is massively empowering to understand what those kids may be going through. It gives you tools to know how to deal with them and yourself. But let's keep it practical and realistic. How can you regulate yourself in the middle of a work day? Let's say you are a teacher, a primary school teacher in a difficult school with difficult kids. Micro pausing. Take a second before you run from one meeting to the next, before you go from the staff room where you've been surrounded by people and you've been talking all lunch to going back to your class. Give yourself 30 seconds, a minute to just have a deep breath and to just ground yourself. Feel your feet really digging deep into the ground. That is a really important thing for us to learn to do. Actually, it really does impact our nervous system, is to actually feel the ground. Take slow breaths. Slow down. Don't worry, you won't miss out on anything and you're not going to be late. Take that 30 seconds. Downshift the pace. I definitely remember when I was a high school teacher, I didn't know any of this stuff, but I did notice that as I was dealing with really annoying teenage boys, particularly age 14, they're a special breed. If you talk to them a little bit slower, they will calm down. They will calm down. They will match. You will match. Nervous systems follow rhythm. So if you are calmer and slower and quieter, the other person's nervous system will match your rhythm. And that is an incredible skill when you've got a completely dysregulated child or parent or team leader or colleague or whoever, to be able to downregulate somebody else because you've seen that they need that is an incredible tool for any situation, but also for yourself. Speak a little bit slower, slow it all down, take control of the pace, and you will find that your own nervous system also calms down. Now, one of the things that I'm most passionate about, which I haven't spoken about in this episode so much, is about our environments. We live in boxes, I've said this before, and I'm a big believer in beauty and nature. We need that for calm nervous systems. We need the right kind of lighting at home, at work. It's so important. Lighting impacts our mental health so much. The airflow can affect how we're performing and how we're doing. Noise can affect everything. And clutter. Clutter is one of my pet peeves because what it does is it creates mental chaos. It creates endless unclosed loops that you can't control, and your brain is stimulated by that. So when you look around a room that is just absolutely strewn with clutter, you'll probably notice, if you pay attention to your body, that your heart rate may rise a tiny bit. It is causing stress. It is. There's no, even if you think it doesn't bother you, maybe you're not attuned to hearing, listening to those subtle shifts in how your body is responding, but endless amounts of clutter cause mental stress. So if you work in a massively cluttered environment, it will be impacting your productivity. If you live in a home that is full of clutter, the same thing will be happening. It will be more difficult for you to come down at the end of the day, to switch off, especially if it's your bedroom that looks like that. You will find it's harder to go to sleep, and you may not have anything to compare it to, so you can't prove me wrong. But please go ahead and try it. Try and remove clutter. Clutter is one of the things that in my design business is one of the first things I address. If you need storage, put the stuff out of the way, out of the visual line. There is a difference between decor that tells a story and gives a sense of belonging, and clutter, which is unresolved mess and chaos. They are not the same thing, and they do very different things to your brain and very different things to your nervous system. So your environment has a huge effect on all the things that we're talking about. So finally, nervous system resets that you can make in the workplace or the home. Step outside, go outside, fresh air, something that impacts your physical body. These are things that I'm also learning myself, is actually interrupting a narrative that your brain, your nervous system, you can interrupt that cycle. If you feel your body is responding, your nervous system has reacted to something, and maybe you're feeling a little bit more pumped and your cortisol levels have risen and your heart rate has risen and you're feeling a bit stressed or a bit clammy, interrupting what's happening in your body with something physical will reset you. So splashing your face with a bit of cold water, going outside and having completely different airflow into your face, shaking your body out, doing some long exhales. Inhales is extra oxygen and it will stimulate and give you energy, pump you up. Exhales being longer does the opposite. It calms you down. It expels that extra energy. So regulation does not require these long yoga retreats and long routines. It requires awareness, reading yourself well, and little course corrections throughout the day. And those are not actually hard to do. So finally, the last thing I want to talk about is what is this rooted and rested thing that is going on. It's not just a podcast. This is actually based on my own system that I have created, my own signature method, which is a coaching program that takes people through a 6-month journey of regulation. But it's not just about nervous system. It is nervous system, sure, but it's also looking at how that nervous system is interacting with everything that person has in their world, and their environment is a huge part of that. But it's also their relationships, it's also their history, it's also their job, it's also their workplace, it's all kinds of different things that it crosses paths with. So it's not just about personal well-being, and it's not just about mindset. It is the integration of the body, the environment, and really healthy leadership rhythms. And like I said, leadership can be applied all over the place. But these three things are always interacting, and you can't actually separate them out. How you work, where you work, and how your body experiences all those things. How you live, where you live. Whatever word you want to use there, we are all very holistic people. You can't separate your mind for work and your body for home. They are all working together and experiencing your world and your life at the same time together. So my program, Rooted and Rested, is very much about bringing all of those things together and understanding how they can be controlled, actually, in a good way. They can be understood, they can be worked with, they can be really good indications and signals that we need to learn to listen to so that we can have healthier lives, that we can be empowered, and we can be stretched in a really nice way so that we can thrive. That is always the ultimate end game for everything I do, is getting people thriving in a way where they're not breaking or overwhelmed or burned out, but just living in a way they want to live, that's healthy for them, that is released and empowered. That is always what I'm aiming for. So in closing, I think the thing I really want people to get to a place of is where they know that the leadership that they have doesn't feel like a constant internal pressure. So they can lead more clearly, they can make better decisions, they can take the time they need over the decisions. But if there is a time crunch on that decision, they can take those decisions from a regulated place, where they can create healthier environments for everybody around them, including themselves. And it starts with the very basic thing of listening to the body, understanding the body, interpreting the body, and working with the body. Is actually about leaning into the systems that your body has naturally got and understanding what they're trying to do rather than fighting against them. And that is really what leadership, I think, is all about. And like I said, leadership can start with self. I believe it does. I believe self-leadership is the first port of call. I think it's something that's overlooked. We don't give time to work on ourselves enough. And that's not a selfish thing. I don't think people should be indulging in self. I think we live in communities, we live in families. I do believe in self-sacrifice. I do believe in putting others first and loving others well. That's why I'm doing this. But I can't love somebody well if I am broken and I'm causing damage because I'm unhealthy. I got to do that work on myself. But then it's time to start giving back. And of course, the work is never done. We're always in a process. The journey is never over. But I do feel like this area of understanding ourselves and working with the history we carry, the lenses that we interpret the world through, is super important to make sure that we are healthy and that we're creating healthy environments for those that we're working with. So that is all for today. Please join me for the next episode where I'm going to be having a guest. I'm super excited about you meeting her. She is one of my favourite people in the world and she's got a lot of really exciting insights to share. So please tune in for that, and I will see you in the next episode.